my son. You can't keep running from your problems, Baka.
What do you mean? I'm literally standing here.
They want having you painted the Koreans. You can't keep running from the Koreans. They're gonna get to you. It will be like the last train to Busan. You saw how fast they can run.
There is a voice in my head that mostly screams at me to move to Paraguay, but also whispers to me, "Why are you not painting the Chosun troops? You should paint the troops." Well, I'm busy. I'm busy with the Japanese and like living a life, but mostly the Japanese for miniature wargaming. Thusly, I am torn between two cultures, which I believe is the plot of Pocahontas and Avatar. Both cautionary tales on the dangers of foreign cultures, which is also like this story with the Imjin War, actually, but with less dating. When I was younger, in a similar fashion, I wished to be a savior archetype for multiple cultures and nations. Kind of like, a world celebrity situation, like Napoleon or Alexander the Great. That would have been nice. But that never happened, which is why I'm doing miniature wargaming instead. In times of existential dread, revert to infancy. The miniatures won't reject you, unless you get a cease and desist from Games Workshop. Branded IP miniature companies, closely guarding said IP, run the risk of ruining your playground because you find out that while it is technically your playground, they make all the rules, and strangers won't want to play with you unless you toe big playground's line. Maybe you don't care, but it is a feasible risk in miniature rejection. In a heartwarming parental bonding moment, Games Workshop has you in a headlock as they metaphorically wrestle your army, retail value $20,000 USD, from you very slowly, with new additions of rules, invalidation of miniatures, and lowering of point costs. This is why I play historical. You can't change the past, believe me, I want to. And invent new units, no matter how hard the historical revisionists try to put Space Marines into the battle at Thermopylae to raise Games Workshop stock price. But one of the problems of historicals is there is no one in the playground, relatively. But I don't care. I do what I do because I'm insane, not because it's popular. Because it's really, really not popular. It's not hated. No one's died. But the indifference to wargaming the Imjin War from other hobbyists is the same reception that normal people have to any form of wargaming. So the effect ratio is squared when introducing Katie from reception to the Imjin War. You open a new dimension of interacting with the world, hitherto inconceivable, as information overload of various cultures and events with real-world relevance becomes processed, ensuring Katie will forever be too busy to get drinks after work, probably because of overtime processing of the siege of Tongdae. Katie would similarly become out of reach after mentioning the Horus Heresy, Manus Calga, or the fabled Necrons, and would eventually call HR. And even now, I'm in hiding from the authorities, as the Paraguay trip remains a contingency option. Wargaming the Japanese invasions of Korea is like another level. It's like a niche within a niche. Even everyday people have heard of Warhammer. There's probably like 200 people who know what the Imjin War is outside of Korea. We don't include Korea because we have to include all of them. They have statues in public places of heroes from that exact war. That's how you know that it's embedded in the national consciousness. So anyway, I need to paint my Sengoku Jedi Japanese for a game. However, only painting figures for one range gets very tiresome, and my Chosun army really needs to expand. Aesthetically, Korean troops are very different from Japanese troops. Let's not get racial, I'm talking about equipment. To me, the main point of difference is the armor, in terms of colors and armor complexity. Generally, in this period of the Imjin War, Japanese armor is lacquered metal, usually in black, brown, or red. Most Japanese armors have some form of rope work or decorative cords. Korean armor has a variety of textures and colors. There is a lot of cotton exteriors, which can be a vast range of colors. There's metal, and there's various other textures, like leathers. Lower end Lamellar could be made of leather, for example. There generally aren't rope work or cords, but when they go into Lamellar, they go too far with the cords. More on that later. Chosun was also unique for incorporating white clothes extensively into everyday wear. In East Asian culture, white is seen as a color of mourning and is worn in funerals. I have worn it myself when visiting the graves of my enemies. Now, Koreans didn't exclusively wear white, and Chinese peoples had various minorities who incorporated white into their clothing, but the Koreans were known for wearing white extensively, so I also tried to incorporate white clothes on my models when possible. For countries that are culturally and geographically so close Korea and Japan really took armor development in quite different directions, which I find immensely fascinating, both for my love of history and love of painting. So expanding my Joseon army would be a nice alternative from the regular programming. But I have very little time, so I'll paint 2 figures, 2 Handgonnes. I already painted 1 figure by Redbox in January, just to paint something to mark the new year, and now it's May. My squad at this point only consisted of 1 model, the Redbox figure converted from a brigandine sword wielder. I gave him a kettle helmet and a 3D printed handgun. I like converting models, it gives them a personal touch, and I like the power stance on this model. But I didn't want to convert the whole unit, and I had already known that I was going to use the Wargames Atlantic poses in my squadron. So the additions to this growing squad had to complement my existing model, which isn't hard, but it's something I kept in mind. So I wanted different armors, not brigandine, for the other front rankers I was going to paint. The new Wargames Atlantic Joseon handgunners are great models. There aren't many options on the market. Perry Miniatures make a dual arquebus and handgun kit of figures wearing brigandine, but it's in metal and in 28mm scale, so those are limitations. You have a lot more flexibility with 3D printing. Yes, you could probably use other models as substitutes, and you can do conversions, but these ones work well with minimal effort. Looking at these models, they have detailed gunpowder accessories for the handgun. This is good, but also problematic. They have 1 set of handgunners in Lamellar armor. Historically, and for my own figures, there were no uniforms, and units would have a mix of armors. So if I want to use different armors, they would not have the detailed gunpowder accessories on the bodies. This might not matter to some people, but I'm one of those people who want my models to be complete. When details are missing, it bothers me. So my solution was to convert a paper armored body into a handgunner by green stuffing the accessories. I sculpted the gunpowder casket, the folded cloth, and the bamboo lighting stick. But the mini shovel was far too hard. I wanted a paper armored trooper because I wanted the historical non-uniformity that would also fit into the Righteous Army themes of a mix of social classes and units thrown together by circumstance, with Yangmin peasants rubbing shoulders with Yangban nobility, made equal and unified by common cause to defend king and country. Another reason I wanted a paper armored trooper is because painting Lamellar armor is really freaking hard. Paralleling the terse relationship between the snake and the mongoose, or myself and personal responsibility, Lamellar is the natural enemy of painting. Anyone trying to make a period-accurate Song Dynasty army has essentially chosen death. Why do you think you never see Song Dynasty armies anywhere? Not even on pictures online. The emptiness is a mark of those brave soldiers passing. That is why I will never start my Song Dynasty army. Yep, that's the reason. Painting Lamellar would be challenging, and I would have fun for about 2 minutes. Rapid depression set in as the chords were too thick and had to be redone, or were too high or too low. Painting Lamellar is lame. Incredibly, Lamellar armor is even harder to depict than samurai armor, and that is a genuine achievement. Look at the intricate levels of rope work binding the lames together. Yes, samurai armor has fiddly rope work as well, but generally the rope is more spaced out or tightly packed in rows together that maybe you could use a wash on or dry brush. But for Lamellar armor, these lames are bound in patterns that leave small gaps of armor between the chords, smaller gaps than with Japanese armor, but not so small as that you can't see the armor beneath, which would actually make painting easier because you could just dry brush or use a single color on the whole panel. So the chords are thick with intensity. For the love of God, I challenge you to find an armor type harder to paint worn by general infantry. You won't. It's impossible. I think the difficulty is compounded because my sculpt is resized from native 28mm to 20mm or 1/72nd scale, meaning the little chords are made even smaller. At times, they are genuinely difficult to see, and painting seems more of a process of dabbing and praying than actual skill. Oh, hey, yeah, look, I'm recording.
Where we're gonna live? Are you painting the miniatures again? Have you painted the rent?
Wait, hold on, guys, hold on. Mom! You don't understand, I'm painting Lamellar. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Alright, what was I talking about? Yes. As progress continued, and it did feel like quantitative progress, as I could see the rows being filled in. The emotional journey is much like any hero's journey. Each row is a new cycle, a new proverbial day, a new summit to scale. Over time, the cycles decrease in speed and intensity as motivation dips, and rather than running on pure rage, I had to draw deep upon the invincible drive to never succumb and become a human paintbrush. To cope, I could take up the pipe and become a crack golem, but as a well-adjusted member of society, I had healthier solutions, such as putting on the most extreme rap music in my arsenal. I listen to almost anything, I'm quite versatile with my music choices, like hip-hop, and R&B, and gangster rap, and drill rap, and rap rock, like lots of stuff. But I can't really relate to the anecdotes of gang violence, narcotics distribution, and sexual prowess by today's warrior poets. But damn, that shit is banging. Game's Red Nation is a perennial classic. The problem is not merely that Lamellar is such a fiddly construction to depict. It's also that there is so much of it. By God, you finish a row in triumph, doing the miniature equivalent of Everest. And then you realize there's another row of panels, and it's lame, dude. It's so lame, bro. There are multiple rows of Lamellar, mirroring the circles of hell, each ring being just as painful as the first. More painful, even. As with Adam and Eve, knowledge of the fall has been gained and cannot be unlearned. Yet one cannot stop either, because that would be, as the kids call it, a weak-ass move. There comes a point when you just fall into the rhythm of things with any pattern. Though the process remained difficult throughout, and I had to keep fixing mistakes, eventually the rows were done. And that was the whole challenge. Everything else was relatively easy to paint. The paper armor is just flat, with some nails, and clothes don't really have fiddly details or patterns. Brigandine can be challenging depending on certain depictions, having difficult rivets, but Lamellar is by far the hardest armor I have ever painted. While working on green stuffing accessories, I noticed that my squad leader had an empty sword scabbard. I originally left it empty when I finished the model in January, out of laziness really, but I had always thought I would come back to it when the time was right. I sculpted a sword handle and guard using references of Joseon, Hwando. I also sculpted an ammunition pouch, but I did not add anything else because it was so difficult painting the brigandine rivets that I didn't want to cover up my old work. With that, my models were done. The end result is pleasing to me. Although, I don't like how similar the two new poses are. Their dress, armor, and coloration are completely different, but the poses look very similar, and that's not great. Some people want their figures to be carbon copies of each other. I've seen armies where the infantry are all the same sculpt, because that's how the creator likes it, and more power to them, but I like every single one of my miniatures to be unique if possible, which is why I convert and vary my figures across different manufacturers. This end result of 3 figures present diverse armor types that makes each individual stand out. I think you can see that good results can be achieved with traditional red box plastic or the new resin 3D printed sculpts by Wargames Atlantic. It just depends what you make of the models and the materials. And remember, you can always convert your figures. The hobby should be a creative process of exploration. In the relentless monotony of painting Sengoku Jidai Japanese troops, there came this brief distraction from the great work, like a light from a distant sun. Remember, if it's not Chosun, it's not fun. And also, just because it rhymes doesn't make it true. It has no bearing on its validity whatsoever. I'd like to thank my Patreon supporters, the Command Bunker and Mikhail Belusov, who have both expressed interest in Chosun Koreans at some point. May this be inspirational to you guys and everyone else watching.
Alright, so no more running. I finally done some more figures for my Chosun army. It was time. I'm quite busy with like real life and like my Japanese army, which I have to finish like right now for deadline, but like I can't just let the Chosun army stay so neglected. So a little bit of progress, a little bit.